What's up guys, Scipio here, and today we have a video that I've been wanting to do for quite some time on a gun that I've been wanting to get for quite some time. That gun, of course, being the Keltec PR57. So finally we have a review of this thing I picked up about 2.5 months ago at a very small gun show. It was actually kind of funny that it was one of those gun shows that didn't have that much weird stuff there, and it was like in a hotel, like, event room lobby. Very tiny, only a step up from being a gun store, honestly. But they did manage to have this one, which was cool because I've been eyeing these up since they've been announced at the beginning of the year. Unfortunately, they have been scalped to literal hell, and this was by the big retailers that Keltec was providing them to. I saw these go for, like, as high as $867. Now, I would post the screenshot of that because I specifically got it to show it off when I would do the review on this. But I guess YouTube doesn't like me showing prices in videos. But no, the big retailers literally were selling this for more than double its price. I mean, I guess you can't get mad at them because when you have idiots that will actually pay for that. Anyways, yeah, I waited till these things were, at least close to the MSRP. The MSRP is $399, and I got this for like $420. Now, these come in 4 colors. You got black, as should be expected. Then you have tan, titanium blue, and green, which is this current one. These are incredibly lightweight, coming in at about 13.86 ounces unloaded, and when fully loaded, they come in at around 19.2 ounces. Now, before you actually me and pull up the 18.34 ounces the internet brings up, I actually did weigh and did the math for loading 21 rounds, as for some reason, everyone considers this to be like a 20+1 gun and not a 21 round gun. So fully loaded appears to mean just 20 rounds to most people, and likewise they'll get that 18.34 ounces when weighing the thing fully loaded. There is a reason to think that this is maybe a 20+1 gun. We'll get to that a little bit later. All right, so I finished making the video and I never actually got into why I think they say this is a 20+1, so I'll just put this little segment in here. So this is loaded with 20 rounds right here. You can see these 2 little nubs right here. Those are actually from the magazine follower. And the Keltec has a neat system where on the 21st round, normally on an old pistol, when this thing reaches well before that actually, that's your full capacity. But they actually have those cutouts right there that end up sticking out a lot more when you load your 21st round, and then you go to chamber it, and they sit somewhat flush at least. I think that's why they say it's a 20+1. I'm just going to say this is a 21 round gun because it still doesn't make any sense, but that is a neat little feature that they did add there to, I guess, keep the gun more compact and yet allow for more ammunition, as the little cutout in the bottom of the pistol to just let your follower come down a little bit and give you like an extra 2 rounds. Anyways, as mentioned, this thing is exceptionally light and exceptionally slim, which is a direct result not only of the cartridge being fairly small, but also the fact that it takes stripper clips and doesn't take detachable box magazines. I mean, this thing is a double stack pistol with a width that rivals even some single stacks, and this is exceptionally helpful not only for concealment, but also for getting an easier grip on the gun, as given the caliber, the grip is fairly long, which I have seen most people have an issue with. I myself find it to be a little bit odd, and if you are used to something like a 9mm, this is going to be something that you will notice initially and need to get used to. With that, I have fairly small hands, and I found getting used to it not really to be that difficult. I think if this gun were a bit wider, then it would have taken more getting used to. Granted, I'm not used to 5.7s at all, so that's probably just a common issue with 5.7s, but its current dimensions are definitely manageable. Now, this gun does have some fairly aggressive knurling on the grip, which may lead you to think that perhaps that'll get a little bit uncomfortable with inside the waist carry, and surprisingly, while it is very aggressive, it doesn't really cause any added discomfort when carrying. I would say it feels like carrying any other pistol, but the slimness of it really does make it a lot more comfortable to carry than standard double stack pistols. Now, of course, a gun that's pleasant to carry should hopefully be pleasant to shoot to some capacity, and I will say that out of all the pistols that I own, this is by far my most favorite one to take out to the range. Despite its incredibly lightweight, a weight, mind you, that is almost 4 ounces lighter than the very tiny SIG 365, this gun has practically 0 recoil. I remember going from a Beretta PX4 Storm in 45 ACP to a 92X in 9mm for my main full size that I used to run in competitions, and being wowed at how much less recoil the 92X and its smaller 9 had over the 45 ACP PX4 Storm. And I gotta say, going from my SIG 365 in 9mm to this lighter gun in 5.7 honestly had the same wow factor, which may seem like an unfair comparison, but again, keep in mind I have fairly small hands, so the tiny 365 with 15 round magazines, I feel it's not too far off or an unreasonable comparison. And now I have heard that this incredibly light recoil is a result of the way the barrel unlocks, which Rather than using the traditional Browning tilting barrel that tilts, well, down, this pistol utilizes a rotating barrel, with these lugs pressing up against the front of the slide and preventing it from opening until the barrel has rotated and they are in line with those cutouts, allowing the slide to move rearward. Honestly, the two things are very different from one another, but I can't help but think of the barrel as like the bolt head of an AR-15 that someone has just lengthened and turned to a pistol barrel. Now, it would make sense for a rotating barrel to provide less recoil, or more accurately, provide a more straight recoil, as opposed to diverting it downwards, causing the muzzle to flip. However, I will say I actually have plenty of experience with the system, and honestly, I have seen guns with the tilting barrel perform the same, if not have a more manageable recoil, than those with this rotating barrel action. That Beretta PX4 Storm I mentioned earlier uses the very same system, albeit the blocking lugs are located in the rear as opposed to the front, and I will say that after putting thousands of rounds through that thing over the years, that I have most certainly seen other 45s of a similar weight and build that use the more traditional tilting barrel action that wound up having the same, if not a more manageable recoil. The tilting barrel system isn't a bad one in the slightest. However, in my experience, the recoil advantage you supposedly get from having it over the tilting barrel has proven itself to not really be that noticeable. Where I believe this gun really gets its low recoil is in its cartridge. 5.7s are naturally just low recoiling rounds, so it shouldn't be too much of a surprise, I guess, that a gun chambered in it is going to have some exceptionally light recoil. Now, coupled with the light recoil and fairly good handling, the gun also has an excellent trigger. One of the things I saw that really scared me was the pistol being listed as a double action trigger, which I know revolver fans are probably smirking at this, but from what I've shot revolver-wise, which isn't a whole lot I'll add, I've never really been a fan of double action triggers. Now, however, that being said, while this is a double action only trigger, it's not double action only in the sense you may be thinking. The hammer does have to be pulled back by the trigger with each shot, however, it only has to be pulled half the travel, with the slide actually cocking it around halfway of its full length of travel. So while it is a double action, technically, it does need to be cocked with each shot, which I'll add is a little bit of a disappointment. If you figured that you could just do dry fire practice, you could just, click away without having to rack the slide each time, but most certainly not a disappointment when it comes to actually shooting, because the trigger is pretty darn good. Now, when it comes to sights, you just get some plain old dots on some posts, nothing too out of the ordinary for stock pistol sights, although I will say the paint job could have been made a little prettier on this particular one. I mean, I know we aren't exactly dealing with a super pricey match grade gun here, so we can expect to see some cheapness shown here and there, but I feel like I could be fairly intoxicated and still paint a better dot in the sights than whoever did this one. With that being said, as far as function goes, I am quite fond myself of the 3-dot classic irons. I might be a little bit biased with the white dots given my PX4 experience, but I do think they are very quick and easy to use. Now, many of you are likely curious on optics mounting, and that is one thing that I haven't done with mine. However, they do provide you with a plate that mounts right to the top with 2 screws and fits all the optics that utilize an RMSC footprint, so you have a fairly decent amount of optics to go with, and it's also fairly easy to install. The plate does appear to hold firm and interlocks with these ridges, so I imagine that should you wish to go with an optic, it's going to have a very rigid connection to the gun. Plus, again, as mentioned, keep in mind that this is a very smooth shooting gun, so it's not like it would be beating the hell out of it anyways. And honestly, while I myself have zero experience handling one of these with an optic, I will say that from images I see of these things with dots on them, they still appear to be very slim and compact, so if you're already carrying something with a dot, I imagine you'd have no problem carrying this thing with one. I myself just don't care for pistol dots in anything but competitive shooting, so it just stays with the regular boring irons. Now, after enough pleasant shooting, you will eventually, of course, need to clean the thing, and despite the weird setup it's got going on with its barrel and internal magazine and such, the process is actually incredibly simple. So to start off, you're going to take your pistol and obviously make sure it's not loaded, which this one isn't. Now, this one, it's a little bit weird of a disassembly process, but you actually take the trigger and push it forward, and then you'll push your slide forward. This separates your 2 portions. Now, for cleaning, you just probably give that a good wipe. You don't really need to do much for cleaning. Now, when it comes to the actual slide disassembly, you just remove these 2 springs right here. And then you'll have that little plate right there that comes out. Pop the barrel. And that's your basic field stripping. Again, it's a different system, but it's no more complicated than a Browning tilting action. Reassembly, just throw the barrel right back in there. Take this plate right there, set it right in there. Next, you're going to take your spring, and those 2 little nubs will go into those 2 holes in the front. And you're going to compress it and have it sit right on the tip of that little edge right there. And then if you are just solely cleaning the gun, you'll just take this and slide it right back on there. You do want to make sure that this spring kind of goes between those two sections. Sometimes if it's favoring left or right more, it'll just start bumping up against it. But you'll just slide it on, and then you'll notice that the back portion will hit the magazine follower, so just press the slide release down a little bit. Go past that. And then give it a little bit of a pull back. Press that. And it is fully assembled. Now, this is your pretty standard cleaning process, something that you really don't need to do too often. I myself usually let my pistols or guns in general go through thousands of rounds before ever cleaning them, unless they're finicky or if I'm shooting black powder or corrosive ammunition. However, there is a portion that you will need to disassemble should you plan to carry this and have it loaded all the time, and that is removal of the magazine spring. Typically on pistols or rifles we keep loaded, you can just cycle your magazines to keep your springs from losing pressure. Obviously on this gun though, we have no detachable magazine, so in order to do this, you'll need to cycle the springs every so often, which I usually go about 3 weeks before I cycle mags, or in the case of this thing, springs. Now, I could probably let it sit longer, but it's what I've always done. It works just fine. Now, disassembly and reassembly of the internal box magazine is just as easy as the slide. And this portion can actually be done with the slide on, so I'm not going to bother taking that off, though. I think under normal circumstances, you might take the whole gun apart and remove it, but first, you're going to take a punch or something to drive this pin in the lower grip out. Now, you don't need to worry about it springing because this bottom cap is retained by that front piece. Obviously, you will want this gun to be unloaded when you do this. And from there, you're going to take it and just slide your front piece. Now, obviously, the spring is going to want to come out, so be ready to catch it coming out the bottom. And just slide your spring out, and then from there, if you have a spare spring, you'll just take the other spring and throw it in there. If you want to take the floor plate out, obviously, that just comes out. But that is pretty much how you would perform a spring swap. You just remove that little pin right there, slide that forward, and then in and out. If I recall correctly, when I did this the first time, it was fairly stiff to push it forward. This time it actually wasn't. I don't believe spring orientation really matters. It should be the same on top and bottom. Yeah, it looks to be the same. Just slide that in there. Hopefully I can do this on camera. This spring has lost a lot of its tension. When these come fresh out of the box, it really can't be underestimated or understated just how much like tension they have versus they get worn a little bit. There we go. So with that, spring in, and then you just slide that forward like that, and then you're going to take your pin, place it right back in the grip. You get something hard to push it on. And that is how you perform a basic spring swap. So yeah, keep all that in mind. Again, if you do choose to carry one of these, and it's always going to be loaded, to pick up an extra spring or two. I mean, it's not the end of the world if you can't find one right now. This particular one actually has been, for the most part, fully loaded for about 2.5 months, just to see if there would be any issues that would come about. And with that, I haven't noticed anything negative in regards to the pistol's functioning. However, there was something I did notice in regards to the pistol's functioning that is important to bring up, and that is that fresh out of the box, this gun proved to jam very frequently. Now, initially, I assumed that it was just not liking the hollow points or polymer tips specifically, as minus Fiocchi's subsonic 62 grain, the normal full metal jacket stuff I got from American Eagle and Fiocchi ran really without any issues. I think I got maybe like 1 or 2 malfunctions. A Hornady Critical Defense actually was the only non-FMJ to run without an issue, though honestly I only ran like 25 rounds of that stuff. But yeah, that first range session, I went through about 400 rounds of very mixed ammunition types, with me assuming that this gun only really liked running FMJs. I mean, you'll see in some of these clips, we had some ammo running without a hitch, and then others jamming nearly every other shot. Now, next range trip, I decided to test out Spirit Gold Dot and SS198LF just to see if there was a hollow point loading this thing didn't hate other than the Hornady Critical Defense. And I also brought some Fiocchi Hyper Performance that I had left over, which was one brand I noticed this thing in particular seemed to especially hate. And the Spirit Gold Dot gave me 2 failures to eject on my last 9 shots, and the SS198LF had 1 failure to extract. But the Fiocchi Hyper Performance had 0 issues whatsoever, and in future range trips, I noticed this thing appeared to get more and more reliable, to the point now where where unless I run cheap AAC, the gun seems to run perfectly fine. Actually, I recall the only review I bothered to read up on this thing did make mention of a 500 round break-in period, and that for the most part does seem correct. However, I think one of the biggest things that helps with breaking the gun in is keeping the magazine loaded for a little bit just to let the spring loosen up a little bit. Because as mentioned, between that first and second range trip, the number of malfunctions went from almost like a once a mag minimum to 3 out of 150 rounds. And the only thing of note that I did between the two trips was I had the mag actually fully loaded for about a week. So I think if you just let it sit for like a week or two with the mag loaded to loosen up the real stiff spring, that'll get rid of most of the issues you'll end up having. It really can't be understated that it does come stock with a fairly tense spring. I mean, I will make mention that I did perform like a light lubrication after that first range trip. I don't think that had anything to do with the gun performing better, because when I actually bought this thing, it was pretty lubricated. I didn't actually really add much more to it. To be honest, if anything, I just cleaned off the fouling, the little bit of fouling that I got, and just re-added the same amount of lubricant to it. But I am pretty confident that it was that whole letting the spring, you know, just loosen just a little bit of tension after about like a week or two. That really did end up helping majorly with the reliability on this thing. Honestly, come to think of it, that 500 round break-in period is actually probably a lot less, despite what I just said. I only came close to it due to firing off 400 rounds my first trip, and that's just because I had the ammo on hand. Maybe if I would have shot less and then just let this thing sit and then, you know, shot a little bit more, it would have been much less than 500 rounds. So if you buy one of these, I will say just load it and let it sit for like a week or two. Now with that, I have heard that these things can be easy to limp wrist as well. I didn't experience that at all with mine, I don't think. But granted, I'm a fairly experienced shooter with a lot of range time, but just keep that in mind. If you continue to get malfunctions, you can try and work on your stance. That was what someone had told me in one of the comments section, that these are very prone to limp wristing. Now, one last issue that I have most certainly experienced, and for some reason my friend I brought out with me kept experiencing, is after loading a mag or stripper clip into the gun, you would go to drop the slide and there would be a bullet that would just be stuck right there and would just be pushing right against the feed ramp. Now, this has only happened to me like on the first round of a fully loaded 21 round mag, and from memory, it never happened if I ended off with a stripper clip. The only time it happened was if I single loaded it, but it would always be the first round on a freshly loaded mag. I never had it happen on like just a partially loaded mag. Now, there was 3 ways to go about dealing with it, either by racking the slide real hard, or what Keltec actually recommends in the manual, where you tap the base of the grip real hard if it ends up doing this. Now, that gets really tricky because on 21 rounds, there's actually a little plastic piece sticking out. Obviously, you don't want to pile drive that with your hand, or any object for that matter. That being said, I did actually notice that both of these methods tended to solve the issue. However, I did get a few scenarios where I had to use another bullet to lift the front of the round up to either feed better or just remove it entirely. And usually it was that second option where I just had to remove it entirely. Now this isn't like a frequent problem. Honestly, I only had it happen to me like a real small handful of times, and most of the times when I first bought it. And my friend, you know, he had it happen to quite a few more times, but I think both scenarios can be chalked up to improper loading of the gun. Now, exactly how that happens, I'm not sure, because I have tried to replicate it, but I can't exactly figure out a way to make it, you know, happen on purpose. It's certainly a problem that does appear to really only happen when you end up like single loading it, and again on a fully loaded magazine, and it's not super common, but it is there. I've had it happen enough times to, you know, confirm that it is a thing with this pistol. Now, speaking of the loading process, I think it's now the perfect time to address the elephant in the room, and that is these things. The weird little thing that makes this weird little thing stand out, these stripper clips. These come in 10 round stripper clips. You load 2 of them, and then you'll throw a last little single round in there for your 21 round capacity. And they come in 2 pieces, so I got one right here. And essentially, it's just this body right here with this tab. Now, the tab comes out. In fact, when I ordered a package of these, I just had the tabs out. So that is normal for the tab to come out. And you can load these without the tab. It's rather difficult, so just trying to lose the tab. I have all my clips in little Ziploc baggies, just so I have that in place and I don't lose them. And these clips, I've noticed they kind of come in somewhat of a variety. For the most part, the ones that I had ordered were all very firm, no real like looseness to them, very tight tolerances for plastic, that is. I did get some, however, that will, when you load the pistol, this little piece will tend to pop out, and I know the two that came with the gun over time have kind of started to do that. But now with this, we'll demonstrate how to load the pistol, because it is fairly easy despite being a weird little system right there. So the way these actually work in loading the pistol is your slide locks back, and then you will see you have that little tab right there, or rather two little tabs, and then you have the single like little plunger or push thing in the back. The middle portion of these two lock into that little circular divot, and then that portion, that portion acts as a stopper and allows you to push all of the rounds into the gun. So just take a clip for demonstration. We got this one right here. Going to lock it in like that, and then push the tab in. Now, with the loose clips, you will occasionally run into the problem where this follower will want to also push out. It won't push into the gun, obviously. At least I haven't had that happen, but it will push out. It is a little bit of a nuisance. I've never been in a situation I need to speed load this, but it is a little bit of a nuisance. But with that being said, these aren't really slow to load in the slightest. I don't imagine you'll be getting into many gunfights. You'll need more than 21 rounds of 5.7, but should you need to load any more real quickly, it's not that bad of a process once you get the hang of it. However, that being said, I know that there's going to be some people that are curious just how fast you can actually do this. So why not demonstrate it? I'm going to go unload this real quick, which one little con to this pistol, which I know a lot of people are wondering, does it have that cool button with the Steyr-Hahn or the Steyr-Hahn hat where you can just press it and then all these fly out? No, you have to actually either cycle the slide 20 or 21 times, or what I like doing, because I don't like scuffing up the ammo, is pushing them out of the feedway and then pushing that one out of the pistol. But anyways, I'm going to unload this real quick, and then we'll be right back and see just how fast you can do this under stress. Alright, so we're in a scenario where we need to top off 20 more shots of 5.7. Now, I will say this was asked to me quite a few times, what it's like to carry extra clips of this thing. Now, I never carried extra mags with my carry-on at all, the 10+1 and the 21 round pistol. Probably not going to carry extras too. But I did try it out just to answer the question. Having two 10-round clips in your back pocket really isn't that noticeable. Again, it's 21 shots. I'm not going to bother carrying the extra 20. But if you do wish to do so, I really didn't notice them there, to be honest. The only annoying part was having to remember to grab them. But I will add, though, that it's pretty neat to be able to carry essentially your 21 and then 20. That's almost a full box of the 5.7 in a very small package. But anyways, I'm just going to replicate what I guess I would do in a situation I have to speed load this thing. Now, obviously, it's not going to be as fast as a magazine, but it's not as cumbersome as you would think. So anyways, we'll just replicate running out of ammo. Alright, so that felt probably a lot cooler than it'll end up looking, but that was probably the smoothest I've ever reloaded one of these things. I was just going based off of how I was carrying those clips in my back pocket. Usually it would be free from obstructions, like I wouldn't have my wallet and stuff in there. Having to fish it in there and all that, though, two separate clips. A little bit, again, it's not really a scenario that I think you would ever run into carrying one of these. The 21 rounds should be more than enough for anything other than if you ran in competition, which you wouldn't be allowed to run a 5.7 in any competition, to my knowledge. So it's not really a scenario you would probably ever find yourself in, but if you did find yourself in, you can kind of do it fairly quickly. Obviously, under an actual more stressful environment, you're going to maybe fumble a little bit. But yeah, I will say though, those clips ran fairly smooth, but there is an issue that I have gotten more than once, and that was you will load like 9 of them, and then the last one will just not want to push in. This might have been me just not forcing the follower enough, because I am afraid of just popping it out and then having to deal with the loose follower in there. But that is a thing that I have noticed is sometimes you'll load 9 and then you'll have to like go push that last one in. But now, one thing I will make mention of before we go, because I've also seen a bunch of people make comment of it, and actually I myself was curious on it as well. So you can single load this thing. Now there is always the concern, of course, this is spring loaded, and well, You know about Garand Thumb, where the bolt can close in your hand. What about the slide closing on your hand? So initially I was actually going to run a test where I just kept loading it singly. But if you look at the actual like working mechanisms of the pistol, I really don't know why I didn't think about this. Sounds kind of stupid, but I mean, you're never in any way, shape, or form going to push that down. It's perfectly hidden. I don't know if it's even going to show up on the camera. All right, so I took the slide off. Now it'll go down without the slide on because you don't have the tension from the slide pressing up against it, which is what would keep it in place once the rounds are actually in there. But if you're thinking that you can just, bump a little piece of it or whatever and it'll go down, I guess it's better off to show that in the slide. But if you're thinking that you can bump a piece to like push that down on your finger, yeah, it's honestly not possible. It sounds stupid. I was wondering that, but I know a bunch of people were wondering that too on single loading it on the, accidental bolt closes or pistol slide closes on your finger. But anyways, I think we've gone over pretty much everything with this pistol. It definitely does have some issues going on with it. You definitely need to kind of work with it a little bit, but I will say, should you get it to run to your standards and all that, compactness-wise, they are fairly comfortable to, keep on you. They're very lightweight. I tend to pocket carry when I'm home as opposed to inside the waistband carry, and it's so light that I almost will forget it's in my pocket. And then, slimness, again, very slim, very compact and all that. So that's just, I guess, that's the entire gist of everything that I have experienced with this. That is the official Scipio review of the Keltec PR57. I hope you all enjoyed this really long video as much as I personally enjoyed making it, and I will see y'all next time.